Amen. We're in 2T 693 paragraph 1, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to see if we can just get a simple understanding of what these reform lines are teaching us. The history of Christ, we saw that there was Messiah or a deliverer who was going to deliver us from sin. In Moses' line, we saw the same thing, a deliverer who's going to deliver us from Egypt. And in the Millerite line, we want to see what that is teaching us. So we've got some thoughts, some ideas. We've got a message about Second Advent. Christ is going to move from the holy place to the most holy place, beginning the investigative judgment. And Christ is a deliverer, and he wants to deliver us from the world or from Rome. We also saw that the first angel's message, which we know comes in this history specifically, is connected to Matthew 25 and Daniel chapter 8. Matthew 25, it's "Behold, the bridegroom cometh," and Daniel 8:14 is the work of judgment. So we were just exploring a little bit about Matthew 25, how we would apply that. Even if we might not understand the complexities of the parable, I'm sure we all know what Matthew 25 is essentially dealing with. It's dealing with the second advent of Christ, isn't it? "Behold, the bridegroom cometh." Isn't that what it's really supposed to be dealing with? You agree with that? Yeah? What passage did we read when we picked that up? It's 393 paragraph 4. So I just want to pick up something from there. The coming of Christ, as announced by the first angel's message, was understood to be represented by the coming of the bridegroom. The widespread Reformation under the proclamation of his soon coming answered to the going forth of the virgins. In this parable, as in that of Matthew 24, two classes are represented. All had taken their lamps. So she compares Matthew 24 with Matthew 25, which is why people were querying when I put Matthew 25 here. And what's the comparison that she's making between chapters 24 and 25? When it says, in this parable, as in Matthew 24.
That's the two classes.
It's the two classes. So what verses are those in Matthew 24?
Verse 41.
Sorry?
From verse 41.
So let's just go there. Sorry?
Verse 20.
40.
It begins in verse 41, but that is brought out in verse 45.
So we could go to verse 41, two women. Verse 45, then it talks about the servants, two women, two servants, two groups of people. I guess we could also go back to verse 40. And even though it doesn't say explicitly, we could go back to the story of Noah. We'd have to go back and see in the story of Noah, there are two classes represented. So, all of those two classes that are brought to view in Matthew 24, what's the context of those two classes? We could go back to verses 29 and 30. Is that where we'd see those two classes?
Yes.
Is that what we would do? Is that how you would approach it? Yeah? You'd go back to 29 and 30 and you'd see two classes being shown, because when you go to Matthew 25 it begins with then. So how do we understand then? How do you understand then? Matthew 25 verse 1.
Matthew 25, it is Christ is giving about the events that will transpire until now when is the greater time for separation of two classes.
Okay, I want to know what then means.
It's a continuation.
A continuation of
24.
So it's a continuation of 24. And she ties that together and tells you what part of 24 it's connected to.
Okay, do you understand the word then? It can refer to a continuation, but it can also refer to something that happens at the same time that something happens. So Matthew 24 is illustrating a history, but at the same time it's going to introduce another parable that will be illustrating the same history.
So when we look at the word then, it can be applied in two different ways. So we could say, first this, then that. So it would be sequential. Or the way we can use then is when this is happening, then this is happening at the same time. So we want to understand which it is. And you can see contextually that it's this second one here, that it's happening at the same time. And Ellen White just confirms that when she says, in this parable as in 24, two classes are represented. So she compares both chapters. So we want to see that the then is talking about the same history as Matthew 24. And I guess the vision would finish 31 in Matthew 24. And then when they get to verse 32, it says, now learn a parable. So as soon as you get to 32, we're now getting a parable of what that vision is. Is that how we would see that? Anybody got any different view or a comment on that? So once the parable is given in Matthew 24:32, then it says, so likewise, when you see all these things, know that it is near, even at the door. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. And then it talks about those two classes of people. So, when you go to Matthew 25, and we say, behold the bridegroom cometh, it has to be connected with 29, 30, and then 31. And 30 is talking about the second advent, isn't it? Do we agree with that? You're going to see the Son of Man come in the clouds of heaven. That's the proper application of Matthew 24:30. Anybody see that differently?
Matthew 24:30.
Verse 30. It says, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven.
Okay, what I think, when we come to verse 30, it will depend on how you take that cloud. If you take it Daniel 7, it's 1844. If you take Revelation 7:1, it's in the second advent. So it depends on how you take the cloud.
So what did Christ mean when he said that? What is their question? The time of your coming. So he's going to answer the time of his coming. And 1844 isn't the time of his coming. It begins a preparation period, which is the investigative judgment. So it's a clustering of events that precede Christ's second coming, but it's not his second coming, which is the question that they're asking. It's not even really the end of the world, beginning of the end of the world, time of the end. So say if the Millerites had done their job properly, if they had done their job properly and then 1844 was just going to be followed by Christ's second coming soon after, would that have been 1844 or would that have been Revelation 1:7? Did someone say something? You didn't say anything? I heard some voices. Oh, you did say something. You can't.
I think verse 30 has to be the second coming when you connect it to verse 31. Because it says, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and they shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather. That sounds like the second coming rather than 18.
Yeah, but I guess Brother Rogers is going to make an application and say those angels are the Millerites. Yeah, that's what we're going to make an application there. But I wanted to see it's an application. And the reason we're going to get an application is because of the Millerite line is a line of failure. They don't do the job that they're supposed to, and they make their mistake right at the very beginning. Right from the very beginning, they get this concept of what the judgment is incorrect. So Christ is going to tell them about his second coming, because that's what they're interested in the end of the world. So we make an application of 1844, and then we're going to reapply that passage, aren't we? We'll have to reapply it when we come into our history. Is that what we would do? Yeah? When we do that, we don't do verse 29 so well, depending on how we're going to do verse 29. I don't know if people understand what I mean by that. You've got two choices. If we were to mark 29 as 1798, we know it's not the exact date, but there's a clustering of signs that are going to bring you to that. It doesn't have the earthquake there, does it? That's in Revelation 6. So you've got 1780 and you've got 1833. Is that what verse 29 is going to give us? So if that clusters around 1798, and then you went to verse 30, and you made verse 30 1844, like you said, Daniel 7, when we come and make that's an application. In the original context, this was 29 and this was 30. What would it be for us? This would be the second coming? Yeah? That'd be the second coming? What would this be? This would be 1989? Is that how we approach it? So if this is 1989, what would we see these to be? Because we'd have to make an application of that, wouldn't we, if we were going to make that 89? Even if we don't know what it is, do we agree we'd have to do that? Yeah? We'd have to find out what the sun going dark is and what the stars falling if we're going to see what this is. And I don't think, I've not seen anybody do that. I don't know how easy it is to work out what the sun, moon and stars are if we were going to make that application. We could make another application and keep that as 1798, and then it would all fit, wouldn't it? Keep that in its original context, and we'd come to the second advent. But if you did that, what would you lose? You'd lose 89. You'd lose our reform line. You don't have a reform line then if you do that. So, as a movement, we've still got to work that out, how to actually. I think, for me, one of the primary prophecies that we have about the end of the world, we haven't quite got correct. We haven't tidied up. We haven't worked out the bits and pieces, unless anybody's got any insight into that. So I could highlight the problem, but I don't have the answer to that. Anyone? No? Everybody understand what I'm saying? Yeah? So, to me, there's an important principle that we want to see here, is we can approach this three ways. 1, 2, 3. In its original context, which one would we go for? 1, 2 or 3? As Christ gave this. 3? Everyone saying 3? Yeah? I would go for 3. I don't know if anyone's got a different. Anybody has a different one? I would think it's 3. Ellen White talks about that explicitly, and we know it has to be the second advent because that's what Christ was referring to. As I say, we're not putting 1755 there. So, Matthew 25 is talking about the parable of the 10 virgins, is talking about the second advent. Behold, the bridegroom cometh, which is what the Millerites were preaching. They were talking about the second advent, weren't they? That's what they were referring to. Early Writings 55. She's going to mark October 22nd here as the tarrying time. Are we all familiar with that?
Yes.
Yeah? So she's going to mark the tarrying time. So she's going to do this application here. But the Millerites were doing this one. They were doing this application, making... It's not 1798, obviously. It's going to be April. Even though, yeah, they understood it to be April. So they would use application 1 and Ellen White's going to be using application 3. Any questions on that? So we've had a chance to think about this one. Have we got any more thoughts about what we can mark as a theme for the Millerites? What was their testing message? The special truth that they had.
I think the judgment hour cry.
Sorry? The judgment hour cry. Same? They had a special testing truth. The Messiah is going to deliver you from sin. That was what the line of Christ teaches. The line of Moses, there's a deliverer, he's going to deliver you from Egypt. What's the testing special truth, the special light that the Millerites have?
I'm going by what you say, the judgment hour.
The judgment hour?
Still the same.
Same?
Yeah.
Same? Is that yes?
Okay, I have a thought. The test that they were undergoing is the principles that were laid and the rules of the way they could arrive in setting that the time that Christ was to come to deliver them. So that was their test, as you see that from 1840 onwards, the way they responded with the principles and the rules that were laid until now they reach until the tiring time of 19 onwards. So according to me, what I think is...
Well, their line ends... We'll put 44. We could argue that it ends later. So you can't go to the 90s. Is that what you said? 1980?
Their tests, how they responded with the laid principles and rules, how they applied.
Yeah, but do you have the same problem here? How they applied the rules? How they apply the rules? So we could say the same thing, but it'd just be rules for each one. Because then you mentioned about time, and we've recognised that each of these lines have time associated with them. So it has to be something separate from rules, something separate from time, because time is a common thread that links all of these lines together. In fact, we're going to make an argument now that every one of these reform lines has time, and why doesn't our line have time? That's one of the arguments that we're using to say we have to have time embedded into our reform line. But there still has to be something different or unique about this line. My brother? I'm going to come round. What? What's their special testing truth? The judgment hour cry, the same one?
Judgment.
The judgment, same answer? My sister? You don't know?
I'm still confused.
About what? Have I confused you or have they confused you?
Are you asking what was the special message for their time according to our perspective or according to what they were doing?
Okay, so when we did this one and this one, how did we approach? We'll go with this one. How did we approach this one? But you were here this morning and we did a thorough review.
According to our view.
According to our view, is our view the correct view? When you say ours, you mean objectively. That was the truth. So the truth was there was a Messiah and he was going to deliver you from sin. And the incorrect or the mistake that they made was there was going to be a deliverer and he was going to free you from the Romans. So it's almost correct. And Moses was what? Everybody knew he was the deliverer. Everybody knew he was going to release them from Egypt. So all that was correct. So what was the mistake? It's the way he was going to deliver them, either through force of arms or through the miraculous power of God. So both of those were the objective understanding of what that line was. So this one will go the same way.
So objectively, it's investigative.
The investigative judgment. My brother? The same? You want to say something more?
There are 12 from lines we are seeing something which is consistent. We're looking at the person, then accepting the deliverer. And also here, the second also above that we are seeing that they're accepting a deliverer. But then we come to the third line, we're now looking at the message, not a person.
You said it was the message. That's what I get you. So you want to change your mind now?
Yeah. Yes, the message was the judgment message. But again, to be consistent demands that if we are seeing deliverer, then here we must also say deliverer.
Okay, so you want to put Miller there? Or what?
Yes.
Miller. I don't want to put a thought into your mind, I'm asking you.
Yeah, they had to recognize the person who God has given the message which is going to deliver them from that darkness.
Okay, my brother?
I think before the judgment hour started, there had to be a deliverance from spiritual Babylon before the judgment started. So the point is making is also right because the prophet was raised to deliver them from spiritual Babylon. Then thereafter followed by the spiritual judgment.
Okay, I'll let them come back and I'll come back to you. My sister?
Event.
Sorry?
Event.
Event? What event?
From the first lines, the line of Christ, you saw the Jewish not accepting Christ as the Messiah because he did not deliver them from the Roman yoke. And the line of Moses did not understand how he was to deliver, how deliverance was to be done. The Millerites were proclaiming the second advent, and they were misunderstanding exactly what was their message. So their test was the event. Due to my argument.
Okay. Sorry? Investigative judgment?
Okay, so we know that in the time of Miller, so before Miller came, White saying there that the only church was death condition. So God was to raise people to let them get alive at that time. So deliverance from sin and sin is also is a point. Because before Miller, people were having a captivity of temporal millennium. People were believing that there is 1,000 years and then will come. So I can see deliverance.
And who's the deliverer?
Miller.
So you want to put Miller? Judgment hour?
So they say because Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 8, 14 and Revelation 14, 6, 7 are telling the same thing. Judgment.
Sorry, Daniel 8 and Revelation 14 saying the same thing?
Yeah, it's judgment.
Is Matthew 25 and Revelation 14 saying the same thing? Matthew 25 says nothing about judgment.
Yes.
The same event.
The same event. So Matthew 25 is picking up what event?
1844.
It is? Okay.
Okay. If you read this controversy, 423 paragraph 1.
Great controversy. 1 second. The whole paragraph, or
During the whole paragraph, it has the word present duty.
okay?
Which was treated as present truth.
423.1. The subject of the sanctuary was the key which unlocked the mystery of the disappointment of 44. It opened to view a complete system of truth, connected and harmonious, showing that God's hand had directed the great Advent movement and revealing present truth. Is that what you want?
Present duty.
Present duty, as it brought to light the position and work of his people. As the disciples of Jesus, after the terrible night of their anguish and disappointment, were glad when they saw the Lord, so did those now rejoice who looked in faith for his second coming. They expected him to appear in glory to give reward to his servants. As their hopes were disappointed, they had lost sight of Jesus, and with Mary at the sepulchre they cried, "They have taken away my Lord, and know not where they have laid him." Now in the Holy of Holies they again beheld him, their compassionate high priest, soon to appear as their king and deliverer. Light from the sanctuary illuminated the past, the present and the future. They knew that God had led them by his unerring providence. Though like the first disciples they themselves had failed to understand the message which they bore, yet it had been in every respect correct. In proclaiming it they had fulfilled the purpose of God, and their labour had not been in vain. In the Lord. Begotten again unto a lively hope, they rejoiced with joy unspeakable and full of glory.
So, at that point, because when we laid our lives, we were not identifying the misconceptions that were in those histories. We were identifying the message we were supposed to proclaim correctly. And in this quotation, she's going to give the misconception, but identify the message that they were correctly to proclaim was the work of our high priest, which is investigating them in the holy bodies.
So, that's what their message is, the judgment hour cry, is that what you're saying?
Yes, so in the class we agreed.
In the first?
In the class we had
yes.
Morning, we agreed that the message of the Millerites was Daniel 8:14, but according to Great Controversy 424, which is Daniel 8:14 equals to Revelation 14:6-7. So having that in mind, if you read LSMS 112, paragraph 2, LSMS, life sketches and landscapes. 112.
Just life sketches or?
Life sketches and manuscripts.
Yeah, life sketches and landscapes.
I don't have that, I can't find that.
LSMS.
It doesn't come up as my coding. I can just do LS.
LSMS.
Oh, maybe that's a new one. I don't have that on my computer. I don't know. Okay, let me... Okay, I'm going to read this from Great Controversy 424, paragraph 1. It's the same passage. Great Controversy 424, paragraph 1. Both the prophecy of Daniel 8:14 and to 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, and the first angel's message, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, pointed to Christ's ministration in the most holy place, to the investigative judgment, and not to the coming of Christ for the redemption of his people and destruction of the wicked. The mistake had not been in the reckoning of the prophetic periods, but in the event. Through this error, the believers have suffered disappointment, yet all that was foretold by the prophecy, and all that they had any scripture warrant to expect, had been accomplished. The very time when they were lamenting the failure of their hopes, the event had taken place. So what did you want to pick up from that?
So what I wanted to pick up is that, so it says both the prophecy of Daniel chapter 8 verse 14 and Revelation 14, 6 and 7, they point out to the same thing, the investigative judgment.
Yes.
So that is the special message.
Okay, so...
Because both their messages, they point us to the investigative judgment.
Even though they had made a mistake, the passage that Brother Rogers read for us says that they actually fulfilled God's will in that message that they gave. So in essence, he says they didn't make a mistake, even though we know that they did. And what about Matthew 25?
I didn't have it in mind, I just had...
Okay, so that's your evidence for investigative judgment, judgment hour cry. Sorry, start again.
In the reign of Christ, we said we had John having a wrong view of the message which they were having. Again, Christ was having the right view of the message. The second line of Moses in the beginning of the 40 years, the first 40 years, he was having a misconception of the message he was having, but later he understood. Now coming to the line of Millerites, I want to argue that at first they are having a wrong view of the message. Christ is coming literally in 1844. But now, afterwards, they came to understand that Christ came with the ancient of days, and he came to blot away the sins. So I want to argue this investigative judgment.
Okay.
Yeah. I would simply say it's investigative judgment. Reason being, the first angel that has a connection to these events which they fail to understand which was going to take place on October 22nd, which is the beginning of the investigative judgment.
Personally, I would use the logic of using the other two lines that we saw that John, in the history of Christ, was giving the first angel message, and there is where you find that the Messiah was speaking about Christ and he was the test. In the history of Moses is the first angel, still he is the deliverer. So, in the Millerite history, the first angel's message was a warning against judgment. And the judgment that we know that was there was the investigative judgment. So I go with the investigative judgment.
So when you say he was warning against judgment, you said the first angel was warning against.
He was saying, fear God and live in glory for the how this judgment has come.
Okay, so you mean he was warning them about the judgment that was coming. Sister Emma?
I'm going to go with what I said originally, which was Christ is the deliverer that they're pointing towards to deliver them from the world and from sin. It's probably both, but it's Christ the deliverer.
So you got Christ is delivering you from
the world and from sin. I think they understood that to get ready for Christ to come, they had to get rid of sin. Based on Charles Fitch's sin shall not have dominion over you. They had knowledge.
Say that again.
I think they have knowledge that to get ready for Christ to come.
Get ready for Christ. So if they're getting ready for Christ, where is Christ? Christ isn't here, they're getting ready for him.
But they had to accept him as their deliverer from sin.
But in this story, the deliverer is here. The deliverer is here. And you're saying the deliverer isn't here yet. We need to get ready for the deliverer.
I'm saying, although Moses is the deliverer, they're required to recognize him. They're not.
Present truth, he's here.
Yeah.
Christ is not here, is he?
Okay, Miller is there with the message of deliverance, which they have to accept. So I'm not sure to say Miller is the deliverer. I don't really like that model. Although I could say that, maybe we could say he's the deliverer, but still their emphasis would be hold the bridegroom comer, the midnight cry, even before the midnight cry. Under the second angel, the emphasis is behold the bridegroom comer. And they're waiting for that deliverance from earth. And I think that's their emphasis. I don't think the emphasis of their message is, yes, the wicked are going to get destroyed, but what drove them was the fact that Christ was coming to deliver them. That seemed to me to be the emphasis of their message from the beginning when he said in 25 years we could see that Christ was going to come. So even though we know they're preaching judgment, their idea of judgment was when he comes to judge, he's coming to deliver. And that's our emphasis, that's our joy, that's our motivation. So and I'm still seeing that seems to line up with the other two lines, that it's almost a combination of both. They want physical deliverance, but they see the need to be delivered from sin as well.
But all of them, these ones, they saw that the deliverer was here.
Yeah.
And he was going to do this work for them in this history.
Although with Moses, yeah, he's going to do that work for them, but it's still the end they're looking at to get out of Egypt. It's not so much what he's doing there.
They don't know when he's going to deliver them. He says they think they're going to deliver them here. So the whole story is about delivering from Egypt through this history.
Okay. I'm still.
The deliverer has to be here to deliver you. But you're saying deliverer isn't even here to deliver you yet.
Well, in that sense, Miller is the deliverer. They have to accept the message of Miller to get delivered.
I'm not trying to force you into a...
Still trying to line up the fact that in both the other lines they get the message of John under the first part, under the first name. So John doesn't understand it, but Christ does. And then in Moses' line, he doesn't understand it at first. So you could say that's the title of the first angel, even though I know it's the first and second. But when he gets to the second, he understands that God's going to deliver him in a different way. But I'm looking at Millerites thinking, what didn't they understand from first to second? Because they seem to get in their knowledge a third of the correction. So I don't know how to line that up, because I want to see the parallel in the line.
Brother Festus? Are you joining us? Oh, are you busy? Okay.
So I'm going to say that I will go with both the investigative judgment of the coming of the believer. And I agree with all the witnesses that have been given in regards to the investigative judgment. That was the primary message. So they have some mistake, but at the end, the mistake is clear. And they understand that whatever has been given and given was correct. But the message was pointing to Christ moving from the Holy Place to the most of the message, but also, it was also the message of the coming of the believer, because they were going to be delivered out of sin, from the bondage of sin. And I'm submitting that William Miller was the deliverer. He is his message. He represents, because you cannot separate the message from the message. So him was the deliverer. And we have Moses, in the line of Moses, we say Moses is the deliverer, Christ is the deliverer. And Deuteronomy 18:18, Moses is telling the children of Israel, the Lord is going to raise up a prophet like unto me. So those three histories, we have Moses. That prophet at one instance is Christ, and Christ is the deliverer. But another application is William Miller, because William Miller is raised in 1818, when he begins to understand the visions of Daniel and Revelation. So in that sense, he becomes the deliverer, and his message is going to deliver them from the bondage of sin that they are in.
Brother Robert?
Yeah, I also have the same argument as his, but I'm trying to reconcile it in my mind. To have a consistency, in all the lines, which we see some aspect of deliverance in the miracles, at least line upon line. But at the same time, I can see the logic about investigative judgment. So I'm just asking myself, can we have, like, in all the other lines we have been having one special message, deliverance? So, like, do we have justification to say that in the time of the miracles, like, it was twofold? Or do we have to stick to the other model?
Okay, maybe it is twofold. What you'll notice, because I've rubbed it out, you can't notice it on the board. Someone said it was the first angel that did that work, and I rubbed it off. I think it was you. He said that, and I think Brother Rogers said, "Isn't Revelation 10 Christ, that first angel?" And I said, "Well, it's not really Christ. It's the first angel, human beings." Sorry? Oh. So I took that out, but I wanted, maybe we need to consider that.
There's something also I forgot to mention. In regards to investigative judgment, maybe we could look at it as this space, that the messages that have been born in those histories, they have something to do with dispensational changes. Like,
the messages announcing a change of dispensation. Like in the general histories, dispensation is changing from the holy place to the most holy place. And we can also see the suspension of change from the time of Moses, where the children from the time of Egypt to also you can see the same. So we can look at it that there's these messages, yes, they announce the deliverance, but they also announce, or they also have something to do with the announcement of the dispensation.
Well, we know there's dispensational changes because that's what reform lines do. So we know that. You had your hand up?
Okay, great controversy, 368, paragraph 2, and paragraph 2 and 3.
Tell us what it's going to say before we read it.
Okay, it talks about...
so great controversy, 368.
Paragraph 2.
What's it going to say?
It talks about the testimony that they bear was about the coming of Christ. And that was the message that the people were to accept.
The testimony of the prophecies which seemed to point to the coming of Christ in the spring of 44 took deep hold upon the minds of the people. As the message went from state to state, there was everywhere awakened widespread interest. Many were convinced that the arguments from the prophetic periods were correct, and sacrificing their pride of opinion, they joyfully received the truth. Some ministers laid aside their sectarian views and feelings, left their salaries and their churches, and united in proclaiming the coming of Jesus. And do you want to go to 3? Paragraph 3, you said? Yes. There is, the next paragraph. Yeah, it's not it's 369, paragraph 1. Everywhere the searching testimony was heard, warning sinners, both worldlings and church members, to flee from the wrath to come. Like John the Baptist, the forerunner of Christ, the preachers laid the axe at the root of the tree and urged all to bring forth fruit meet for repentance.
Okay, to go and then tie with the first angel message.
The stirring appeals were in marked contrast to the assurances of peace and safety that were heard from the pulpits. Simple, direct testimony of the Scriptures set home by the power of the Holy Spirit brought a weight of conviction which few were able to resist. The Spirit of God rested upon them, and with hearts softened and subdued, they joined to sound the cry, "Fear God, give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come." So let's try and put these things together, if we're able to. So if we went back to this line, even though we've got the Messiah, the deliverer is here, and He's going to deliver us, what do you have to do before you receive this deliverance? Sorry? What does John say you have to do? So you have to prepare or repent. So we'll say that the deliverer is here, and we need to prepare for deliverance. And Moses' line? The deliverer is here. There needs to be this preparation. Can we see a preparation in his line? Before the deliverance happens? Yeah, we see him taken away and he gets re-educated to understand how to actually deliver the people properly. So you see the same three components there to deliverer, prepare, and deliverance. So did we see the same components in this story? Yeah? We've got a deliverer, and if we were going to say that's either Miller or the first angel, and what do you have to do before you're going to get this deliverance? You have to prepare. And that preparation is the separation from the world or from Rome. And then what's going to happen? Then you get deliverance. And that deliverance is They thought it was the executive judgment. They were going to leave earth, they were going to be delivered from the earth, but we understand it to be what? The investigative judgment. There's a clear demarcation, a separation. You're going to be totally isolated and cut off from the world.
Okay, there's something I want to put clear about Moses. It was for the people before, because Paul will compare sin with bondage. So in the time of Moses, they were in bondage in Egypt, which is a type of sin. They had been long in captivity, so they were them to accept that Moses has come with a message for them to go out of Egypt. So the problem we cannot say about the message was not resting only. Moses had full conception how he will deliver the Israelites. But there's a way will the people accept me? I'm the one to deliver them from Egypt to the promised land. So I wanted us we put a clear clarification. We put clarification in that point.
I didn't understand what you said.
We have seen there it's about sin in verse point, to prepare by repenting. In Moses, we know biblically, Paul will say that I will compare bondage with sin, being a slave to sin.
Yes.
Bondage. So then the children of Israel were to know that it was their time for the deliverance to come out of Egypt, because they had stayed long time in Egypt until they had adapted, until they thought now that is their home. Now they had to accept that it's time for them to go out for where God has promised them the land.
So you remember on Friday night we spoke about this preparation before they were going to leave Egypt, and what was that preparation that they needed to do as a people? When he comes back to Egypt, the first thing he's going to institute is what? Sabbath reform. So that's that preparation that they need to, when you're talking about sin, they've been in Egypt for so long, they need to straighten their lives out before they're going to get deliverance. Brother Robert.
So when I compare the Millerite line with that of Christ, John has a message, and his message is repent, and the time is at hand. So the time is at hand is the deliverance, and you have to meet the condition, which is to repent. When you come to the Millerites, they have the first angel's message, which is a message about investigative judgment, but you have to prepare. How do you prepare? Fear God and give Him glory, so that you may be ready for the hour of judgment which is coming. So I think it's simple.
So the special message that they have is the first angel's message, and the first angel's message is not the investigative judgment per se, it's prepare for the investigative judgment. It has these two components to it, just like both of these lines had. So when we were trying to say, how do we get these, is it two separate thoughts and how are we going to join them together? The special message here is to separate from the world through the ministration of the first angel's message, or the first angel who is Miller, and to prepare for the investigative judgment. So we've got the investigative judgment and we've got this special work of preparation. And the special work of preparation is basically separating from the world. So we've got all those components to that. And the Millerite history, if we were to go to Revelation 10, manuscript 69, Ellen White would say it's what angels? First and second. She said it would be the first and second angels' messages. But we want to understand it in this context just to be the first angel, don't we? The first angel's message goes all the way through. Fear God, give Him glory, because the investigative judgment is about to come upon us. So, can we think about the Millerite history, the whole 46 years, as all of that is the first angel's message? Everybody okay with doing that?
Revelation chapter 10, the angels Christ Himself, and you say the special message is the first angel. Then, why is Christ not the deliverer?
Why is
Christ not the deliverer in the Millerite history?
Why is Christ not
the deliverer?
Okay, so we could.
Sorry, didn't hear.
Why is Christ not the deliverer? Because in Revelation 10, Ellen White says this is no less a personage than Christ. So when we spoke about that, I think on Friday, I said, well, we know it's not literally Christ. It's Christ's ambassador. Would you agree with that? So let me ask you a question. If we went to early writings, maybe let's go to early writings, and let's see if we can see how Ellen White describes that. So this is page 232. No, I don't want to go there. Okay, I want to go to 240, paragraph 1. (240) paragraph 1. Advent Movement Illustrated. I saw a number of companies that seemed to be bound together by cords. Many of these companies were in total darkness. I'm going to skip halfway into the paragraph, the first paragraph. The last sentence of that. Last two sentences. An angel bade me look carefully, and I saw an angel watching over every one of those who had a ray of light, while evil angels surrounded those that were in darkness. I heard the voice of an angel cry, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come." A glorious light then rested down upon these companies to enlighten all who would receive it. So this is the first angel's message. Ellen White describes this message, this angel coming down. If you go to the next chapter, another illustration, it says, this is 245, paragraph 2. I was shown the interest which all heaven had taken in the work going on upon the earth. Jesus commissioned a mighty angel to descend and warn the inhabitants of the earth to prepare for his second appearing. As the angel left the presence of Jesus in heaven, an exceeding bright and glorious light went before him. I was told that his mission was to lighten the earth with his glory and warn man of the coming wrath of God. So, this is the first angel. Where do we mark that? Where would you mark that? Those first 2-3 sentences. Sorry? So you'd mark that in 1840. Is that how you would mark that in 1840? Anyone else? That's 245, paragraph 2. Is everybody going to mark that in 1840? My brother?
So the thing that I'm seeing here, so let me go in the middle.
The middle of the paragraph?
Second sentence.
Sorry?
Second sentence.
As the angel left, that one?
Yeah.
As the angel left the presence of Jesus in heaven, an exceeding bright and glorious light went before him. The next one?
Yeah.
I was told that his mission was to lighten the earth with his glory and warn man of the coming wrath of God.
So, when you go to Revelation 14 and see the angel that warning that people from the wrath of God, it's the third angel message.
Okay? So you want to make this the third angel?
So, I'm really confused because the first is giving us like 1840. But it warns people for the wrath of God, which in the context of third angel message.
If you read contextually, you know it's the first angel, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know it's the first angel. So even though the language sounds contradictory about the wrath of God, it is the first angel. So, do we want to make this 1840? Because I'd mark it 1798. Brother Robert.
So this is 245. I will show the interest which all heaven had taken in the work. Then the next one is going to say that, okay, Jesus commissioned a mighty angel to descend and warn the inhabitants of the earth to prepare for his second coming. So this is an angel being sent to the earth. I have to mark it at the arrival, which is 1798. Because when you move down 247, again, the same words are going to be used for the second angel. And we mark that at April 19th, so I will be tempted to mark this at 1798.
Okay. Did you have your hand up?
He had to warn the angel, he had to warn the world before the wrath to come. So it has to be before 1844.
Has to be before 1844?
So when we study about the history of the Miller, we are seeing 1818 Miller is being raised at that point, but we are seeing towards 1840 that is where people start to join Miller in proclamation. So because he says that ministers and people united with the Bible and stoutly resisted the light shed by the mighty angel, but all who received it withdrew from the world and were closely united with one another.
So in that paragraph, you can see the progression. So I agree with that. And the way she words it, it says, the light went before him, and he said his mission was to lighten the earth with his glory. So he knows his mission even before he accomplishes his mission. His mission is to lighten the earth with his glory. So he hasn't quite happened yet. So I'm okay that it's progression. So if you're going to mark that 1840, that's Revelation 10, you know that's an angel that does that work. It's not Christ himself. That's the only point I wanted us to see, that this mighty angel that's sent from heaven is Christ in the person of this angel, and that angel is in the person of a human being. It's not literally Christ. You can respond back. Sorry? Okay, remember the sermon that we did, study that we did yesterday, that parables is explaining the divine through the human. And that's what Christ's mission was. He was to explain divinity through his humanity. So I did a simple thing that said parables equals Christ. I don't know if you accepted or agreed with that. And then I said it also equals the everlasting gospel. You can use that same analogy. So when I read manuscript 59, when it says it's no less a personage than Christ, I understand that to mean it's Christ's representative. Who had their hand up? No one? Oh.
Okay. I also want to submit that we can mark this end as 1798 at the time of the end, because it is light in the heart with his glory, and one man of the coming out of one. And we have John's message. And John, the pastor just message, the history of Christ, John is saying, who was wanting to flee from the wrath to come. The wrath was going to come when the probation was closed. So also if you go to the Mira history, Sister White has quotations that says that Mira and his associates gave the judgment covenant and gave the people a warning to flee from the wrath to come. But I'm also seeing something here that I don't know if it can make sense, but I give you permission I can just go to that.
You want to?
I'm saying...
The last bit?
There's something I'm seeing here, I can give you permission I can put it out, though I don't know whether it makes sense. And it is that the angel that is being referenced here is the angel that lightens the whole earth with his glory. And we know that that's the angel, that can be the angel of Revelation 19 that lightens the whole earth with his glory. So we are saying that this passage is referring to the time of the end when the world will be from the wrath to come as So is it logical also in our history if we can consider Mark, the angel of Revelation 18 at the time of the end, warning to flee from the wrath to come?
Okay, who had their hand up here? Oh, no, Brother Rogers had his hand up before, sorry.
Okay, so I wanted to address the issue of Revelation 10, that it is literal Christ. Because when you go to the language of Revelation 10, it's an angel with one foot on the land and one foot on the sea. So the first question that comes to my mind, which part of the land and which part of the sea? And how big is Christ? So that his leg can stretch all the way to the land. When William Miller tells in one of the books, he says that we define things by letting the simple laws of nature, then that has to be understood symbolically. So the Christ in 10 is a symbolic Christ.
And on the same note, when you go to Revelation 18, it says that the 10 kings will make war against the Lamb. It's not literally the Lamb, though we know that the Lamb is Christ, but it's not going to be literally Christ. So the fact that society says that it is no less apparent than Christ does not limit us to understand that symbolically or that representative.
If we go back one chapter to the Advent Movement Illustrated, so this maybe answers my brother's question at the back as well. If we go to 240 paragraph 1, early writings 240 paragraph 1, the Advent Movement Illustrated, the first part of the paragraph is going to be in the time of darkness. You see all these people in the time of darkness, and we'll cut into the paragraph. I heard the voice of an angel, last sentence, cry, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. And then it says, next paragraph, a glorious light then rested down upon these companies to enlighten all who would receive it. Some of those who were in darkness received the light and rejoiced. Before I carry on reading, just go back to that first paragraph. I heard the voice of an angel cry, fear God, give him glory, for the hour of his judgment come. That's 1798. Would you agree with that? Yeah, and you agree that's an angel? Yeah, so that's an angel. Next paragraph, glorious light then rested down upon these companies to enlighten anybody who would receive it. If you read the paragraph, we skipped it, the light from that angel that comes in 1798 can only come upon a select group. Not everybody can receive that light. It's only given to the elite, if we want to use that phrase. Then, sometime afterwards, that light from that angel is going to be given to everybody. Everybody can receive it. That's paragraph 2. A glorious light then rested down upon the companies, everybody, to enlighten all, if they want to receive it. Some of those who were in darkness received the light and rejoiced. Others resisted the light from heaven, saying that it was sent to lead them astray. The light passed away from them, and they were left in darkness. Those who had received the light from Jesus joyfully cherished the increase of precious light. So they're receiving the light from Jesus. So now we've got Jesus there, which was shed upon them. Their faces beamed with holy joy. While their gaze was directed upward to Jesus with intense interest, their voices were heard in harmony with the voice of the angel. Fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. What history is that? Because now we've got fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come. What event is that? Sorry? I don't understand you, sorry. Oh, can you repeat the question? End of paragraph 1. It says an angel came down crying, fear God, give glory to him. What event is that? 1798. So now we're in the second paragraph, and you're going to hear that again now. Fear God, give him glory, for the hour of judgment has come. What event is that? 1840. So this is 1840, and you can see that from the context, because now it says their voices were heard in unison or in unity or in harmony with the angel. So now there's many voices, and we just simplistically say in 1840 it becomes a worldwide message. Many people join the movement. Up to 1840 it's only Miller basically, and then once Joshua Himes joins him in 1840, the whole movement explodes because of his skills as a publicist and a promoter of the message. That's all due to Himes. So lots of people are now going to hear it. So all I wanted to pick up here, it says they join in harmony with the voice of the angel. That's the same angel as in 1798 paragraph 1. You agree with that? So if you're going to make Revelation 10 Christ, you'd have to make Revelation 14 Christ as well. You agree with that? So this first angel would be Christ, then what would the second angel be and the third? You'd end up saying it's all Christ. So as soon as you start doing that, then you have to step back and say, well, it's not literally Christ. Just the argument that Brother Rogers gave, he's not standing on the earth and the sea. He's not literally flying around the earth. It's all symbolic language. Ellen White teaches us that the first angel, Revelation 14, is a symbol of who? Human beings. And whatever the circling around the earth means, either the speed or the scope of the message, whatever those wings might mean, it's a symbol of human activity, not literal angels and not literal Jesus. So when we read that Jesus sent an angel, you don't see that as a literal angel, do you? You do? No, you don't see it as a literal angel. In the same way, it's not literally Christ. It's no less a personage than Christ. Why would Ellen White make that statement? What would she want us to understand by that? It's no less a personage than Christ. So if you're an ambassador to a country, that ambassador, what is he to whoever your ruler is? If someone came to Kenya, the ambassador came, what is that ambassador to the Kenyan president?
The president of the other country.
He's the equivalent of the president of the other country. So if a United States ambassador came, your president doesn't need to speak to President Trump. He just speaks to the ambassador. He's no less a personage than Trump. In fact, the house in which he lives is no less the territory of the United States than the United States. You're not allowed even in that compound, are you? Because it's United States territory. I think it's actually sovereign territory. You're not allowed to... it's just a law that everybody accepts. So I think that's what she's trying to say when it's Christ. It's not literally Christ, if we're okay with that.
So it's confusing me.
Sorry?
The confusion was when we read from S 429, and George is going to say that the angels, they represent people who are going to do the work of God. But coming to the angel of Revelation 10, this is the only angel which George is addressing that is not less personal than Christ. So that's why I was confused. Why is she addressing only the angel of Revelation 10 as no less personal than Christ?
And I think she does that because of the symbology of what he looks like. So then you go back to say, well, why does he look like that? So I don't know if anybody has a thought on that. I don't know if we can know factually what the reason is. It's to show the importance of the first angel's message, at least that, to show how serious it is, that it's something that everyone should take consideration of. Okay, so if we're okay, let's move on. If this is the first angel's message, the first angel's message, this special testing truth for the Millerites, is the first angel's message comes. This is a symbol of the Millerites. We could identify Miller is associates, and they're telling God's people the special message is to prepare for deliverance, or what we would call the investigative judgment. That's that special message of the first angel. Are we okay with that? So, if we can do that for the Millerites, what about our reform line? Now, before we go to our reform line, let's remember this. It says this generation. What's the special test for this generation? So this was the Sabbath. And what we're going to define this generation to be in the context of what Ellen White is doing. What is this generation? We've got a start point. When does that generation end? According to how she is teaching us. Sorry? You mean Daniel 12:1, or would you? So you're saying it goes to Daniel 12:1? My brother? Second coming. My brother?
Second coming.
Second coming? Second coming? Sorry? Okay, close of probation. My sister? Close of probation. My sister?
What was the quote?
What's the question?
Yeah.
Oh, what's the quote?
Yeah.
I didn't hear that, sorry.
What was the quote that...
It's 2T 263 693?
Yeah.
693 paragraph 1. 2T 693 paragraph 1. My brother at the back? When does this generation end? I'll read the passage. Special truths have been adapted to the condition of the generations as they have existed. The present truth, which is to test the people of this generation, was not a test of the people of generations far back. If the light which now shines upon us in regard to the Sabbath of the fourth commandment had been given to the generations in the past, God would have held them accountable for that light. COP? Okay. Do you remember when we did this a moment ago? We said 1798, 1844, then we said 1989, and Second Advent, and then we had a third one, 1798, to the Second Advent. Everybody remember that? And we had option 1, 2, and 3, and most of you said this is the original application. Yeah? If that's the original application, how do we deal with verse 34? Matthew 24, verse 34. In the context of the generation. It says the generation will not die. Because the reason I'm asking is because we're talking about this generation here. It says, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So when we do that, we say a generation, this generation is number 2 and number 1. Isn't that the argument that we're going to use? Because it's the judgment of those who are living. Because we're going to say here, it's the judgment of the living, the judgment of the living, judgment of the living. It's all about living people, no dead people. To each reform line is a reform line of living people. And that's one of the arguments that we're going to do this and call it a repeat and enlarge. We're going to say it was the Millerite line and then it's going to become our line. Is that the logic that we use? Was that too fast? Did anybody not understand?
I think verse 34 is addressing the third version, the third version that seems like, but we normally make application. We can make application that it can refer to, that generation can refer to the generation of 1792 or 1997. So we can make application to the first and second, but it's primarily addressing the third.
Did you have your hand up before?
That's like what you're saying. Therefore, how practical would it be that the generation that spans from 1798 to the Second Advent shall not pass till the Son of Man comes? As in how practical is what he's saying.
Okay, so before you worry about how practical what he said is, how practical is this, what they said all over here? Because they're saying the same thing as he's saying. Everyone's saying that, look at that, is exactly the same as that. Same thing. We picked October 44 because we marked the third angel. But it's still, you still have the same problem. So most people were going to do that. I don't know what you would have put when this generation had passed. Maybe I should have gone round everyone first. What would you have put here? You're not sure now? Rogers.
Okay, now, when you come to those three histories that we have on our board, it is because of the misconception of the Millerites in their history of the name that they were to give that leads us to make an application of, in fact, we say that when you look at verse 30 of Matthew 24, the primary intent is the second advent.
Yes. Hopefully we all agree on that. Verse 30, the clouds is the second advent.
Yes. Yeah. So the Millerites were to understand that we will have these three messages that lead us up to the second advent. So they should have correctly defined that the third angel is not pointing to executing judgment at the second advent, but investigation, then which will lead to the second advent.
The first angel, the first angel, yeah, just for the camera.
Yeah, which will lead to the second advent. But because of their misconception, like that history fails.
That is
that history there, they fail of what God had raised them up to do.
So let me summarize. You tell me if my summary is correct. If the Millerites had done their work properly, they would have gone, if this is the Millerites, they would have got to 1844 and did the first angel's message successfully. I'm not going to worry about the second. Then they would have identified the third, and they would have done that successfully, and it would have brought them to the second advent, and this would have been one literal generation. They would have lived all through that. That's what it was designed to be. Yes. I thought you were going to make another point.
Okay, so basically that's all that I wanted to say. If they had done their work successfully, it should have led them to the second advent. Because if you go to the quotations, many shares that it was not God's will that we should be in this world until this time.
And we're going to use this argument here, with the text, if they'd done their work properly, that we make an application here, number 2, that this movement is doing its work properly. So if we're doing our work properly, 1844 is what waymark for us. If we're doing our work properly, which we are, what waymark would that be? Sorry? The third angel? No? Don't shout out, please.
It would be 10.
Don't shout out, please.
It would be the third angel.
It's the third angel, because I've got the third, but what waymark is it? If you're not sure, it's okay, just say I'm not sure. Okay, my brother? Sunday law?
Not sure.
Sister Emma? 2014. Do you want to fractalize it down? Brother Festus? Daniel 12:1. My brother? You're confused. Okay, so if he's confused, other people are confused. This is the Millerite line. They should have got it all correct. That's what Brother Rogers' argument was. If they'd got it all correct, however long this would have been, that's 46 years plus a bit more, I'm going to suggest this was 19 years. And if you would agree with that, so I'd mark the second advent in 1863. I think they would have located the time, and I think there's an argument to make that point. The second advent would have been 1863. So 46 plus 19 is 65 years. So within 65 years, obviously Miller himself would have died. I don't think he would have survived that long. Just his age, I'm not sure what his age is. but I don't think he would have lived another.
He dies at 68.
Sorry?
He dies at 68.
He dies when he's 68 years old. I'm just wondering if it was possible. I don't know how old he is in 1844, but not many people live. He would have been 80 something, which is technically, I guess he could have managed as well. If he had lived, he could have lived a lot longer, because he died early, because he was 68, he's still relatively young. So even Miller, I think, could have stretched that 65 years. I don't know. Oh yes, we do know. 1798, he's 16 years old, isn't he? We know that.
62.
So he'd be 62 here.
44 years, 62 years.
Okay, so if I do 16 plus 65, he would have been 81. Is that right? Sorry? Yeah. So.
Would be stretched.
Sorry?
Would reach that.
Yeah, so he was the first person he could have reached that. If he can reach it, all the others could. So it would have been in one generation, it would have been literal. We take that argument to say, we're going to say it's number 2, because we're going to make it within the lifetime of us. Because if we didn't have that, when we first started this message, we say, well, the Sunday law could be any time, 100 years, who knows when. And we say, no, it has to be when. Within this generation, we're going to use 34 in this literal fashion, because we take that from the Millerite line. When we first used to do that, we used to just mark the 46-year portion. That was wrong, because 1844 isn't the end of their line. You have to take it a bit further. We've learnt that. So all I was doing is, if we took this line 1798, 1844 and the second advent, I'm saying this would be 63, and we put that onto our line, this would be, because I heard someone say this would be the time of the end, this would be 1989, the time of the end. This would be the second advent, and then what would this be? So you said you were confused. Is that clearer now? Yeah. What I'm doing? What would you think it would be?
Sunday law.
Sunday law. So you're going to say 9/11. So I'm going to say Sunday law. Why would you say 9/11?
Because like when we do an application of these verses in our time, we know what put this at the end.
Okay, so we normally make an application that way, but if we were going to take Spirit of Prophecy and do it, I think we'd say this was the Sunday law. I was going to do LD. Sorry? SL, yeah, I was going to put LD. So used to French. So
when you do that, where do you put COP? Because I've seen the binding 1844.
So that's why there's different ways of approaching it. That's why if we made this 9/11 or Sunday law or COP, there's various ways of looking at that. But I guess what I wanted to show is that 1844 is not the end of their line, and we would go all the way through, because we know that our story doesn't end here. So when we come to this one, and she says this generation, Adventists are being tested by the Sabbath truth post 1844, and does that test ever finish? It doesn't. It's the same test that comes into our line here. It's the same test all the way through. So the way she's using this generation, whatever you're going to mark here, second advent or close of probation, is that a correct way of looking at that? Yeah? So the problem is, when you go to Spirit of Prophecy, she's going to mark number 3. This is the way to approach it. And we don't approach it that way. We approach it differently. And this is a problem that Adventists struggle with, that we stand in opposition to the Spirit of Prophecy. And I think some of us, when we were looking at this on Friday, said, I can't remember how people expressed it, that this was all fine, but Adventists weren't really tested on the Sabbath. That test actually really is going to apply to us. And people wanted to change this around. I'm saying you can't really do that with the Spirit of Prophecy. What you need to do is take the original application, and all of us agreed that this was the original application when I asked you before. I think everybody shouted out number 3. until you realise the implications of that, and we want to sort of jump back to number 2 when you see that it's not a literal. And we have good arguments to make it literal, because this should have been a literal, therefore we should be focusing on number 2 and call this a repeat and enlarge. Now we have to decide who's making applications. Is it us, or is it Jesus or Ellen White?
I'm kind of
Confused? Good.
In this line here, I can see the first angel, but in the third, where do we place the second?
In this here, or this one here?
According to your logic, that the second coming would have been 63. So where do you put the second in?
Oh, in the same place that we normally put it, here, April the 19th. I'm not moving that.
Okay, I get it now.
All I'm saying is that the first angel's message is a message of warning. It's this message that looks like Christ. It's so important. And it says, get ready for some important event. And what's the third angel message saying? Get ready for some important event. Exactly the same thing. The first and the third angel's message are saying exactly the same thing. The end point is just something that's different. And that's why people were marking Daniel 12:1 and some people were marking the second advent, depending where you want to put the executive judgment. If you want to put 3E, the executive judgment, if you want to mark it at the beginning or the end. So we normally would mark it at the beginning, which is why people put 12:1, close of probation, and not the second advent. So 1 and 3 have exactly the same characteristics. So what's number 2 saying? If we take verse 8, 14:8, it just says you failed. You failed to do what? You failed to prepare. Sorry?
For the judgment.
Yes, whatever that judgment is, whether it's investigative or executive, you failed the test. And the failing of the test is identified before you get to the end. You can identify that you've passed or failed before you get to the end, which is interesting. And so the second angel has different characteristics. So even though we normally mark 1, 2 and 3, so you can't have a third without a first and a second, or we say 1 plus 2 equals 3, that the first and second angel's messages that are wrapped in the third. I'm not trying to say that's wrong, but I'm not sure how useful that is. I think it's far more useful to show that the first equals the third. Both of them are messages of preparation. So we're in the history now of preparation. Even though we're in the investigative judgment, regardless of whether it's living or dead, we're in the history to prepare for the executive judgment. And that's all of this history here. The first equals the third. The second is just a marker to say that you've passed the preparatory time or you've failed. And you can see that before you get to the end. So that's why I took the second out. It's not wrong to do this 1, 2 and then 3. That all works, but I think you find that it's not that straightforward to see, and a lot of the time it's because of the way we combine the messages. So let's just summarize, because we need to finish. I think we've now got to a place where we can say the line of Christ, Moses and the Millerites. Before I summarise that bit, I want to make one point. Some lines are lines of failure and some lines are lines of success. So the line of Christ is the line of success. Even though we can mark John having some misapprehension, Christ from the very beginning all the way through understands his message correctly. The Millerites, they get their message wrong from the beginning to the very end. So you can mark the Millerites as a line of failure and the line of Christ as a line of success. We didn't tackle that point, and I'm not attempting to, but we need to understand what our line is. Is our line the line of failure or success? Hopefully it's a line of success, because we're the last line, otherwise it would be a bit bad. So we didn't make that point. There's a deliverer, and you need to prepare for deliverance. We've got that through all 3 passages. The deliverer is the first angel. First angel is here. He looks like Christ. His name is Miller and his associates, and he says, prepare. Come out of worldliness. And we didn't focus because one of the brothers spoke about Rome, and that's an important concept to tackle, because someone else spoke about the temporal millennium. So we know that's a papal doctrine. It's their premier doctrine that these people are going to fight against. So you need to understand that in respect to the preparation. The problem is, when we look at it this way, you're in territory that Ellen White doesn't explain. Ellen White's not going to explain in this way, the way I just explained it, that the preparation is about leaving Rome and defining what Rome is. Rome in this history primarily is the history of time, or the subject of time. And they're going to leave the worldliness, and then they're going to be delivered. And this deliverance means there's going to be this separation. They're going to go into the investigative judgment. So we tackled that. And then what we want to understand in our reform line, what is the sequence of events? What's the testing message? The difficulty is that Ellen White says this generation is being tested by the Sabbath. And she begins from October 44 right to the end of the world. And if you do this, what do you lose? You lose our reform line. You don't even have our reform line. So this model, you don't have our reform line. In this one, we agree that number 3 is the primary application. We don't have our reform line here either. So even though we think that our reform line is very easy to see, we have to construct it. And it's the construction of that reform line that we have to be able to demonstrate is valid before we can even understand what our message is. So tomorrow we're going to carry on and try and work out what our special testing message is. Because it can't just be this generic Sabbath one. It has to be something a bit more involved than that. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we give you praise and thanks for your goodness. We ask that you would be with us and guide us. Help us, Lord, to come into unity one with another, so that we all might walk in step. As we consider the line of the Millerites, the mistakes that they made, the things that they misunderstood, help us, Lord, individually and as a corporate body, to analyse their history carefully, perhaps look at those things in a different way, so that we might not fall into the same traps and mistakes that they fell into. Be with us and bless us, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.